Around 20 years ago, we got GTR, the official game of the FIA GT Championship. Around 10 years ago, Project Cars, and now the latest iteration. Yes, we are here in Zurich to get our hands on Project Motor Racing for the first time, try it out, an early alpha build of the game. And in this video, I'm going to tell you about how it's feeling at the moment. But before we get into all of that, before we get deep into the nuts and bolts of it, how about a brief history lesson?
This game's storied lineage can be traced back to 2005 with the release of GTR. Developed by Ian Bell's Simbin Studios, it focused on the 2003 season of the real-world FIA GT series and was undeniably a critical success. But its sequel the following year, GTR 2, would become an all-time sim racing great. Review scores were unanimously spectacular, and many, still to this day, make the valid argument that GTR 2 is the best sim ever made. When Project Motor Racing was first announced in 2022 to be developed by the newly formed Bell-led Straight4 Studios, it was actually called GTR Revival, which would then be shortened to GT Revival the following year. And in Ian Bell's own words on what was then Twitter, it would be a follow-up to GTR 2, with the original development team. But in a surprise twist, a change of graphics engine and publisher, both now Giant Software, was announced in June 2024, which saw the work-in-progress title renamed Project Motor Racing. So yes, if you're wondering what happened to GTR Revival from a few years ago, this is that game under a new name. And what's interesting here is that whilst GTR or GT Revival is a clear nod to those original GTR games by the same core team, Project Motor Racing feels like a nod to a different, more modern sim racing franchise. After leaving Simbin and Blimey Games, Ian Bell would form Slightly Mad Studios to create Need for Speed Shift, Shift 2, and Test Drive Ferrari Racing Legends. Then, the creation of an all-new racing game series, helped by crowdfunding, Project Cars. This game and its subsequent sequels covered a wide spectrum of racing disciplines, rather than being focused on one series like GTR and GTR 2. And whilst Project Cars and Project Cars 2 proved popular and relatively successful, Project Cars 3 ended the franchise with a whimper. But the question is, will PMR be more like the GTR sequel it was initially touted as, or maybe a Project Cars 4? Or perhaps something different entirely? On the face of it, this is a return to those endurance racing roots, but this time with a focus on GT and prototype racing through the decades. With 70 plus cars split into 10 different classes on launch, this is a powerful, screaming sim racing nostalgia trip through the history of sports cars. And here are the main headlines you need to know about. The game will release in autumn or fall 2025 and is a full game, not an early access launch like so many of its rivals. Pre-order actually starts today, and whilst I don't know the prices as I'm recording this, the game will be available on PC, PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. As I mentioned earlier, there will be over 70 cars at launch split into 10 different classes, and we do know some of these classes already. We know there's an early noughties FIA GT class, some old LMPs, modern hypercars, modern GT3s, and historic sports cars. There will also be 27 different track layouts, although I'm unsure how many circuits or locations will be used to make up those 27 layouts. There will also be a dynamic weather system coined True to Track, which will include a day to night 24-hour cycle and wet to dry transitioning conditions. The game will include both mechanical and visual damage, and crucially, there will be both online modes for multiplayer racing and offline modes, including a single-player career. When I first saw the flagship Lister Storm being shown off, then the continuous teasing of late 90s and early noughties GT cars, I got pretty damn excited, because as a massive motorsport fan with a particular love for this era, the idea of driving these types of machines in a brand new state-of-the-art racing sim, experiencing the noises, the grunt, the looks and the variety, really does speak to my inner child.
Of course, it's all very well and good looking at old GT racing with rose-tinted spectacles and harking back to the days where racing was proper and cars were exciting and noisy. But as much as we love all of that, what we really care about, what I'm sure you guys really care about, is how this game actually feels to drive. And that is what I'm able to discover on a small scale here today. We're not getting too long in the rigs, but I have been able to try a couple of different cars. Currently driving the Audi R8, which was the LMP1, LMP900 car. Of course, one of the most dominant Le Mans prototypes of all time, and a car that I grew up watching on the TV, so it's very, very cool to be driving this in a sim. Obviously, we had it in the likes of Project Cars 2 in the past, we've seen it in other sims before as well. And it's reappearing here in Project Motor Racing, driving it here around Lime Rock as well, which is a track that this car actually raced around in the American Le Mans series back in the day, which is wild to think. But what are my early impressions of this? Well, the first thing I'd say is you can tell that this game is challenging. You can tell that the focus has been put on realism here. This is not a game for the faint-hearted, people that are just going to jump in and be able to do laps without much effort, without much thinking. They're going to get eaten alive. This game requires precision, and I can already tell, I mean, I'm on the grass as I'm telling you this, it's going to require a lot of time to really get used to it and be able to extract the lap time out of the cars.
It was always the intention for Project Motor Racing to be a hardcore simulation, much like those original GTR titles. And to help achieve this, an all-new vehicle dynamics engine called Hadron has been built from the ground up.
I would call it a vehicle dynamics engine rather than a full physics engine, so it works in conjunction with a regular physics engine that is what would be like the rigid body solver. So that's going to do like the actual that handles all the collisions, but that's basically all we're using it for. So, you know, if you have other objects that aren't cars moving around, then they are nothing to do with Hadron. That will just be regular physics. But everything to do with the movement of the cars, well, that's where Hadron comes in and takes over, and it covers everything. So it's, you know, we will simulate like the whole drive chain. So you've got the engine, the clutch, the gearbox, differentials. We've got all the half and connecting shafts in the middle. We're doing the wheels. We've got obviously the detailed tire model. That's covering not only the contact patch, but all of the tread and then all of the carcass. So that's how you can get like that lateral flex where like the, you know, you sometimes see it where if you see like a slow-mo video of a car where it screeches to a stop sideways, then the whole thing will shimmy slightly because you've got the carcass movement, like damping out that inertia. That's momentum rather. And that's all there. And obviously we got air models. So all of that is all the key things of Hadron and more.
Now the force feedback isn't super high on this particular rig that I'm driving right now, but what I would say is that you can really feel the tires underneath you and the suspension movements as you're going through the corners. There's not a huge amount of heavy forces happening right now, so I'm struggling to feel some of the finer details of the actual physics themselves, the way the car's interacting with the road, but I'm feeling the bumps and stuff. I'm definitely feeling the car playing around underneath me. I'm feeling the understeer and the oversteer kicking in and trying to, you know, eat me essentially, eat me alive. And as I'm beginning to get more and more laps under my belt, I'm beginning to get comfortable, and I've been able to drive a few laps without too many mistakes, but it definitely takes a little bit of time to bed yourself in. It's not like some other sims where you can jump in and immediately feel like you're on the pace and you've got a full understanding of how it's going to feel. It was the same in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2 that I drove earlier. It took a few laps to get comfortable, a few laps to try and bed things in and stop spinning, for instance. But then actually, once you begin to get the hang of it, once you begin to get comfortable, it kind of warms to you and you really start to feel that rewarding nature of, you know, taking on a challenge and managing to conquer it. And obviously driving these cars in real life was a bit like that. GT and prototype racing from this era wasn't maybe as easy to drive on the limit as the cars are nowadays. Obviously competition's hugely high nowadays, so times are very close, you have to be very fast, but back in the day it was as much about the driver versus the car as it was about the driver versus another driver. And I feel like that sense is certainly coming through with Project Motor Racing.
Classic cars are very different animals to what we have in modern day road cars, but even track cars. They're quite alive all the time. So as soon as you sit in it, it's already showing its teeth and ready to go. But then once you get it on the track, you know, there's wheel spin, there's a lot of movement with the car. When you brake, the front goes down, the back goes up, the back swings around. When you're going through the corners, you're turning in, then the understeer comes in, then the rear end comes around. And it's actually, you've got a very good feeling when you're actually doing it on the sim itself.
I'm really kind of finding myself in a tug of war against it, trying to just wrestle this car and extract the lap time, but as soon as I push that little bit too far, I'm on the grass. If I get on a curb too much, I'm sliding around.
So, I'm no out-of-the-box Alan McNish it seems, but it is refreshing to drive a sim that feels different to everything else out there, despite the challenges it presents. Sadly, we were only able to sample a small handful of cars and tracks during our limited practice session with this alpha build, but whilst having a play around with the HUD and in the pause menu, we did also spot a few expected features, such as the presence of replays and a photo mode. We also gained a glimpse into the car setup menu, and it all looked as detailed as you would expect from a sim racing title in 2025.
But there are quite a few features missing at this stage, and to tell you more about that, why don't we cut to a cynical journalist?
Yes, things are promising, and I think it's fantastic that there's a big investment in a sim racing title on PC and console at day one. I also think The classic cars drive very well at the minute, with some tweaks on the way that are needed. The contemporary GT3 cars are actually less forgiving at the minute, which is the wrong way around, so I hope they use this 100 driver feedback program to the best use possible. And the eclectic mix of cars is very evocative, and it's very easy to get excited about that and gloss over elements that we need to know before it releases that the team is being coy about at the minute. So I'm talking about performance on consoles. We're only trying it on PC. We're not trying it in VR, although it's clearly working in triple screens already. We don't know about the dynamic weather system. We'll not be able to see the rain in action or the changes of time of day. And also, I think a really key thing that this game could do very well with is mods, but they're again not answering our questions at this time. But if you think about this, has been published by Giant Software. They publish and make farming simulator games. They have a mod approval process. Some modders get paid for their work from the publisher, even though the mod is free for the consumer, and they have approved mods on PlayStation and Xbox, and that would be amazing for sim racing. So let's see if that happens for this game.
So plenty to get excited about, but most of it is still to see, and I must say I do share some of Tom's reservations, especially with regards to some of the more volatile handling traits.
Now, of course, this is a very early version of the game, so this doesn't represent what it's going to feel like exactly when it's done, but of course, you still have to judge it for what it is right now. And I'd still definitely say there's a little bit of a way to go in terms of getting a fully natural feeling. I do find that the curbs, especially here at Lime Rock that I'm driving so far, are pretty slippy. And that was a trait I used to often attribute to the likes of Project Cars 2, where you get on the curbs and it's very quick for the car to get loose. But even when you're not on the curbs, when I was driving around Canadian Tires Motorsport Centre, whatever it's called nowadays, Mosport is what I know it as, but there were a couple of corners, even in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3, where I turned in, and as soon as I got a little bit of oversteer, as soon as the grip changed ever so slightly, the rear became very, very loose, and it was very quick to snap on me.
And yes, I do acknowledge that mid-engine machinery can be quick to snap at the rear with little warning. Trust me, I've raced a few Elise GT cars that have caught me out in this way, but it did feel a bit too unpredictable and a bit too easy to initiate. It felt like it was caused by non-existent patches of black ice, rather than overly ambitious driving.
In the Audi, it's actually feeling a little bit more stable in general, unless you get on the curbs and then it gets very slippy. I'm really looking forward to sitting down with this game and trying all the different cars and really trying to refine a setup as well and see, what you can do with the force feedback, what you can do with the direction of the car setup itself to try and, oh, that's a curb, throwing me off the road completely. What I was trying to say was, I'm really looking forward to just playing around with those nuances and see if I can get the car feeling that little bit more comfortable on the edge. Try and dial out some of the understeer on turn-in, but dial out some of the snappiness when it eventually cracks and oversteers.
And interestingly, it seems like I wasn't the only Traxion member with those exact thoughts.
The way the cars are set up presently seems to be default understeer, then almost like a four-wheel slide, and then oversteer. Now that could be settings in the game, it could be deliberately set up for this event to keep it quite approachable. So we're really keen to try it later in development to see if that changes.
So all in all, it seems we're both feeling cautiously optimistic about the handling and driving physics, but in agreement that it could do with refinement.
But what else can I talk about from this short session? Well, visually, I think the game's looking pretty good. The colours are quite warm, I would say. The greens are quite strong. All of these things, again, can be changed, maybe different by the time this game actually launches. I know that the graphics were frozen in March for this particular build that we're driving right now, but I think it looks good. The lighting looks nice. We're not being able to try dynamic weather, dynamic time of day, all of these things. We're only trying a vertical slice of the game. Should also add these two tracks that I've been able to try today, Lime Rock and Mosport, are laser scanned, and you can really feel every single bump on the road, the detail in that, the marks on the ground. I mean, all of that is familiar now, and we see it with most sims nowadays. I think to be a high-level contemporary simulator, laser scanning has gone from being, an added extra to something that's quite important. Right, we'll go for one more push lap and just see what we can extract out of this Audi now that I'm a bit more up to speed. You've got the understeer when I turn in, but the car's beginning to feel more stable now under power. I'm beginning to get used to it a bit, although I've missed the corner big time. The final corner at Lime Rock's so tricky. I've gone in a little bit too hot. I've locked up the tyres and I've had Ben Collins in my ear telling me I've locked up and that I'm a muppet and I need to do better, so that's a nice touch. But even now, many laps in, I'm still really wrestling the car and trying to find my limits. And it's taken me a lot longer, I would say, than it does on many other sims I've jumped on and tried in a short space of time. Ooh, caught that one. Ben Collins has just told me I'm being pretty bad on the tyres and I need to chill out a little bit, so probably time to call it quits with this one.
There would, however, be one last treat before the end of the day, and it proved to be the cherry on top of the cake. PMR had saved the best until last.
I've now jumped into my third different car of the day, this being the old 1970s Lola T70 prototype. And the first thing you'll notice about this, and this might be different from the Audi before, you might actually be able to hear this car because the speakers are pretty loud and they're surrounding me right now. And of course that distinctive Chevrolet V8 engine comes through. I can feel the torque through the seat, through the vibrations. Now obviously this is an old school prototype, so you've obviously got no driver aids. It's going to be difficult to drive. You've got huge amounts of power, natural mechanical grip rather than relying on full downforce, although it does still have a little bit of downforce based on the shape. And I'd say the first half a lap in this car has probably been my favourite experience of the three so far. It's really interesting talking to people. Everyone's having different experiences of the different cars, but I think for me so far, the way this car's sliding around, the way I can catch it naturally is actually probably the most natural of the three that I've driven. You can lock it up, get the rear going, but then you can catch the slide really comfortably. And I immediately feel like I've got a bit of a bond with this car. I feel like I'm connected to it. Short shifting just to not use too many of the revs, too much of the power at one time, because it is just going to spit me out. I'm kind of learning throughout the day that I'm going to have to treat this game with a lot of respect. I'm going to have to really bed my way into each combo. I can't just go straight out of the pits and nail it on the first lap and think I'm Jim Clark, because it's not going to happen. You absolutely need to ease your way into it, and there, finally, I've taken too many liberties and I'm off the circuit, but we're still going. So maybe for me, I'm going to be into the older stuff of this game. I'm going to be into the 70s and 80s stuff.
So with all being said and done, where were our heads at by the end of the day?
I think there's no doubting as to the fundamentals are here to make a really excellent simulation game, and one that's on multiple devices. And like I say, it is different to other simulations out there, but it's also a bit quirky, I think, in some handling aspects at the minute. Not that that won't change in the future.
It is clear to me that this is an early version. Yes, the potential, the physics are there. I can feel all the suspension and the tyre movements and stuff, but I am hoping that we get a little bit more refinement on how the cars actually handle, because I do feel like the balance between when it's tricky and when it's easy doesn't feel quite right yet. Like, as I was saying in the other cars, I was finding them pretty snappy in the wrong moments, I would say, and then other times they were giving me a lot of grip and I was feeling really comfortable with it. So I do feel like, for example, the GT3 Huracan could maybe be a little bit less deadly with all the assists, whereas the Audi R8 with no assists and this Lola actually feels probably the easiest of the three to drive, which is really interesting. Maybe it's my innately aggressive style. Okay, I say it's easy to drive and I throw it off. That is something that you're going to see a lot of with this game. People throwing it off. You're going to be throwing it off as well, maybe.
Remember that as we move closer to this game's autumn launch, you can keep up to date with all of the news about Project Motor Racing via our website, TraxionGG. We also have continually updated car and track lists on there, so you can see every vehicle that will be appearing in the game as we find out about it.
So I'm going to stop sliding this Lola around because I've got a flight to catch. So as I go and hit all of the apices and the security queues at Zurich Airport, I want to hear from you guys what you think of what you've seen on today's video. Does Project Motor Racing look like something you're going to be getting? Are you going to be in the wall as many times as I am? Let us know down in the comments below, and of course subscribe to the Traxion channel if you want to see more crashes like this and maybe some good driving at some point in the future. We look forward to seeing how Project Motor Racing turns out. But until then, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.